Welcome to the Compact Podcast. Today we'll discuss Trump's address to a joint session of Congress, his dust-up with Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and Meghan Markle's new series on Netflix. I'm joined by Ashley Frawley and Geoff Shullenberger, and I'm Matthew Schmitz. So this week, Trump spoke to Congress. It was a long speech, about 2 hours. It was probably not the most enjoyable way to spend Fat Tuesday. I'm sure more fun was had in New Orleans and other places across America, but some of the people in attendance did dress up. I saw several of the Democratic women and one Democratic man. They were dressed in pink. And Geoff, what did you make of the spectacle?
I didn't catch the whole thing. I appreciate it. 2 hours seems too short. I think he should really strive to compete with Fidel and other, real sort of marathon speech givers, aim for 5, 6, even 7 hours. And this was, I think, pretty common in earlier periods of American history that these speeches would really go on for, so there is a tradition to tap into there. So 2 hours, a little disappointing. I think he needs to do better. Beyond that, I don't know. It was hard to tell. It was the theatrics. I don't know. It seems like there's always been this idea that, this used to be this occasion that was, where you had a certain comedy and decorum, and then at some point, this particular speech, you had Representative Al Green, who obviously should have stood up and started singing "Let's Stay Together," but unfortunately instead, sort of heckled Trump. And, this reminded me of, I think it was Representative Joe Wilson, who is now a notable anti-Trump, sort of never Trump Republican.
Oh, really?
But
is he still in Congress, or is he
former representative? Figure? Yeah, but he was the one who stood up during one of the Obama State of the Unions and said, "You lie." I can't remember what exactly about. So I don't know. It's funny to me that I feel like
Sorry, go ahead, Geoff.
I was just going to say, it seems like whenever these affairs happen, there's some idea that there was some previous iteration of this speech, which was marked by, again, sort of bipartisan decorum and comedy. And then and then somehow, we've declined into this era of hyperpartisanship. And, Trump complained about Democrats, will never give him applause for anything. It's very unfair that they'll never, no matter what he does, they'll never give him applause. So,
even if he found a cure to a terrible disease, and I was like, it sounds like you've been thinking about this, Trump.
Yeah,
but you got up your sleeve.
So I don't know. It seems that every year there's sort of a need to bring back this idea that, once these were these sort of decorous affairs in which the American, ruling class came together and sort of, applauded as one. And I do remember this being a thing that, you'd have certain applause lines that were clearly meant to be bipartisan, and then you'd have ones that were clearly more partisan. So I suppose there was some of that. But, we're always supposed to kind of lament the loss of that kind of unity, that kind of show of unity. I mean, the thing that strikes me here is that, so much of Trump's first term was defined by the obstacles placed in front of him by, both the opposition in Congress, his detractors and critics within his own party apparatus. And so, there was this kind of idea that he couldn't do what he wanted to do, or that there were all these things getting in his way. And now it would seem, these obstacles are either non-existent or kind of purely symbolic or theatrical. And so the Democrats, sort of shows of repudiation and sort of acts of protest during the speech, were partly notable just for their impotence, that they don't seem to be sort of backed up by anything. And so, what we're seeing now is a sort of unimpeded Trump. And, and so then I think what that puts on clear display is the sort of contradictions of his instincts, one of which is clearly he does really want to be liked and wants in a way to be a unifying figure. Like, he does, I think, genuinely resent the lack of applause from the other side. But then on the other hand, he really, wants to sort of troll and provoke his enemies. And so there is just this kind of internal conflict in terms of what he wants to project and get across. And I think that comes out more clearly in part because he is now sort of unimpeded by the external obstacles that hampered him the first time around. And so I thought the speech just kind of put those contradictory instincts on display, that, there is a part of him that wants to be loved, and then there's a part of him that wants to just be constantly engaged in partisan warfare. And so, I think that is a genuine sort of internal contradiction of his kind of political spirit and the spirit that's driving the administration. And it just seemed very, very clearly on display in this speech.
Yeah, the speech about the whole the length of it. I mean, I didn't watch it live, obviously, because that was very late where I am. But I watched it back the next day at 2 times the speed. And even then, it was dragging. Like, how much of that was actually applause and how much was speaking? That's what I'd like to know. But still entertaining anyway. But he really does remind me of presentations I used to do when I was a kid. They taught us, like, no matter how bad it is, you got to sell it. I don't know if it was the same education you guys got as in North America, Canada, but you got to go in there, you got to sell your work. And so I remember once we did this project and it was really horrible, and we were like, it's the greatest. It's so beautiful. It's the best. Trump reminds me of my 12-year-old self. Anyways, so what struck me is, he's sort of rattling off all these programs. And I found it very interesting, the ones that he pulled up. Spoiler, because I'm writing a column on this for my column for Compact this month. But they all sound so silly, right? What was the government doing, empowering and giving all this money to these, he calls them crazy leftists who destroyed our country? I've been working on my Trump impression. I know it's no good. I'm trying, all right? But why were they so empowered? Why was their crazy ideology such a necessary part of governance for so long? And I think that is the question that people are not asking. This is the thing that bothers me about the kind of the way that Trump and Trump supporters understand how governance has been, all these unelected bureaucrats and so on, how they have come to power. It's just like these crazy people who somehow got their hands on the steering wheel of government, but not asking, well, why? And the answer is because they were empowered. They were empowered to do the dirty work of governance because they could give it a kind of leftish and progressive facade. So look at some of these programs that he's rattling off, like, why would you want to have Sesame Street in like some Middle Eastern country? And why would you have this program about LGBT rights in some random place? Because what these programs were fighting an ideological war. They were about indoctrinating people. They were about disempowering and depoliticizing people, teaching people about identity politics, which fragments working class movements. And I do not doubt that the people involved in these programs truly believed in what they were doing. But they're useful idiots, and they hate the West. But empowering them is ironically what allows the Western project to continue, which is through castrating the working class and castrating the political subject, keeping them happy with the way things are. So Trump mentions that they pulled out of the World Health Organization. Well, the World Health Organization has been actively engaged in lowering expectations around health around the world for decades. And that sounds quite contradictory to what a lot happens on the face of it. I'm not saying they never do anything good, but in 1948, World Health Organization defines health as the greatest possible. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something like the greatest possible health for everyone, not just the absence of disease, for everyone. They've really said everyone around the world is going to have the greatest possible health, not just the absence of disease. Now, let me go back to Millennium Development Goals. What were the Millennium Development Goals? Babies shouldn't die of diarrhea, oral rehydration programs. Those were the oh, it's wonderful. We look forward to the year 2000 when hopefully babies won't die of because they don't have access to clean water. And why did that happen? Because of policies of, organizations that are based in the US that were benefiting greatly from giving loans to these countries, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so there's a very deep story going on here. And I just love the sort of hand waving. Oh, these crazy leftists. No, they were doing the dirty work of the United States. They were doing the dirty work of global governance. They were doing the dirty work of papering over structural adjustments and all that kind of junk. Anyways, but I did wonder, the other thing that jumped out at me was he's talking about Canada and fentanyl. There's Canadian, all that fentanyl coming in from Canada. When I don't know how well known this is, but obviously fentanyl crisis is a quintessentially American export, which began with your pharmaceutical companies making claims about, an epidemic of pain and untreated pain. Again, using this language of social justice, we have a duty to treat pain, but it was pharmaceutical companies that were just trying to sell their opioids, and creating this social justice space where it was like, how dare we allow so many people to, go on living in pain? And now if you said, well, hold on a second, you profit-seeking sons of bitches, you're getting people hooked on these drugs, you're getting people hooked on opioids, you're like, oh, how dare you? You are saying that people should be in pain? You want to condemn people to a life of pain? It's a wonderful tactic, and they've been doing it for ages, but that's not, I'm afraid that's not Canada's fault. That's the origins are in America. But anyways, as I was sort of thinking about this speech, I thought to myself, is there any point in doing all this fact checking, right? I mean, this is what everybody does. They fact check till they're blue in the face and it does nothing. Because what is so powerful about a speech like that? And he said it a few times, we're bringing common sense back to America. Well, it strikes people as off the cuff and authentic. And look at the viral video I don't know if you've seen this, a viral video that's been going around of Democrats with the little mics, so they look like streamers, so it looks off the cuff, fact checking Trump, false, this happened, blah, blah, blah. And every single one of them is reading the exact same script. And that's the issue. That's the problem there. It's that desire for authenticity and common sense. And I don't know why it's so obvious and the opposition just doesn't get it. It's this, that's the people are so exhausted with that fake leftist facade. But as I said before, and as I keep saying, it was doing necessary work. It was doing that facade was sprucing up what was essentially American hegemony around the world, something that Trump would applaud. So they're going to want to continue that, and they're going to have a hard time doing it. So what he was really doing was he was signing the death warrant of therapeutic governance, but nothing more.
No, I did find the rattling off of these, I don't know, ultimately I hate to use this kind of a phrase, but that this is like the lowest of low IQ politics on some level. Like this sort of, we saved $8 million for, it's just, it's so ludicrous, just as a political proposition that, sort of, there's something meaningful about cutting some contract for $8 million. But I think you're right. I can't, I don't know. The inner like Matt Iglesias side of me just like revolts at this whole kind of ridiculous thing they're doing. But I think Ashley is right about the therapeutic governance, and why this is in fact significant. Right? It's retracting this particular mode of exercising global hegemony. And, I suppose attempting to replace it with something harder edged and more punitive. And this is, I think, connected to the point about tariffs. But, kind of something else I've been thinking about the last few days, which ties back to the fentanyl point that Ashley brought up, which is, it's very strange in terms of trade policy that the measure that is supposedly being used, according to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, to determine these tariffs is the fentanyl death rate in the United States. So if the fentanyl death rate drops enough, then they'll remove the tariffs. This is the explanation that's been given the last few days. Very, very bizarre way of justifying trade policy, and of setting it. And interestingly, if you read the articles about it, it's like, okay, well, how do you determine that? Well, it's a CDC. There's sort of a CDC report on this, although it takes a while for them to update it, and to kind of gather a national tally of fentanyl deaths. So it's not a sort of easily collected up to the minute thing. But of course, what did this make me think of? Well, COVID, because once again, we're taking a CDC measurement of some specific health outcome and saying we're going to set policy based on this. So I don't quite know what to make of that, but it's a very odd place that we're in. When, I guess this harder edged kind of approach to the rest of the world is to sort of say, these other countries, we're going to punish you for, unless you sort of take actions that will result in, a particular health measure improving within the United States. It's just a very odd proposition. I don't quite know what to make of it, but it does seem to be emblematic of this kind of new way of relating to the world that is being kind of rolled out. And that, anyway, I found that very striking.
Yeah, the fentanyl thing was really funny because, like, it, Trump's talking about all these criminals, and everyone's like, this guy literally is a criminal. Like, Trump is like, there's, we let these criminals, well, people in glass houses. But it's because, obviously, from their perspective, only poor people, I know this is such a stupid lefty point, but let me say it, only poor people can be criminals. Other people are just doing great business. He just made a deal that went a little sour or came to light when it shouldn't have. But like Purdue Pharma and like a lot of these companies that were involved in the fentanyl, like the opioid crisis, they like just straddled the line. Like they were between like outright thuggery and white collar crime. Like they were like literally putting strippers in lab coats. Like it was that bad. So if you want to talk about like criminals, let's talk about, and I'm sure this is a very populist point. The American public would flip and love that. But this is that scary sort of line that Trump has to walk over and over and over again. Does he please his base, the populist upsurge that brought him to power, or does he please the businesses that keep him there, that funded his campaign, that in whose pockets he's living at the moment? because he could never do that. But I find him bringing up fentanyl very, very interesting, because I mean, that is American corporate thuggery right there. And it was like very closely, almost like just not thuggery, not even corporate. It was just like outright thuggery. It was so bad. But anyways, I'll get off my high horse. My what's the word I'm looking for? Is that my hobby horse? Is that, I always screw up these phrases. But anyway, I'll stop.
Yeah, you can be high on the hog or on a high horse. High on the hog, high on the high hog. Yeah, my favorite part of the speech was Trump's spiel about all of these expenses, just because it was funny. And that's really what sets Trump apart as a public speaker. Every one of these addresses has some kind of heartrending story about people in the gallery who have struggled to overcome terrible things. And we had plenty of that, but Trump is able to land a funny line well. If there's a point to his listing of these expenses, I mean, it's interesting. He really frames them in terms of waste, fraud, and abuse, and also of kind of silly leftist stuff. He got, I think, closer to the heart of the issue when he mentioned one of these alleged expenses going to nonprofit Stacey Abrams is involved in. And our writer, Nathan Pinkowski, has talked in the pages of Compact and elsewhere about the rise of a new, you could call it a kind of quasi-corporatist model of governance, where instead of governance happening exclusively through formal state processes, it happens increasingly through public-private partnerships or NGOs, things like this. And there's a kind of erosion of political accountability and of direct state capacity accompanying the rise of new forms of social control through these kind of dispersed forms of authority. And with Trump's recitation of these funny expenses, you could kind of feel the leading figure of the right groping his way toward highlighting that fact of our political life. So it'll be interesting to see where the right takes that. Trump also read a letter from Zelensky saying he's eager to do the minerals deal. And Trump didn't really offer any commentary on that. He didn't gloat or crow as much as maybe could have been expected, nor did he really give us a definite indication of when that's going to happen. But certainly the TV event of the week wasn't Trump's speech to Congress. It was that extraordinary meeting in the Oval Office where reality TV seemed to finally fully make its way to the White House, where you saw the sausage getting made or unmade as Vance and Trump on one side clashed with Zelensky on the other. We've covered it in Compact. Dan McCarthy and David Goldman both wrote for us on it. I thought it was pretty extraordinary and fairly significant events. With a few days having passed, do you think it was had any kind of lasting import beyond the entertainment value? What'd you guys make of it?
Well, it's so funny because when I was watching it, I was dying inside. I mean, I am not sympathetic to, I think that it's no secret that I think the war in Ukraine has much deeper economic drivers than simply a fight for sovereignty, which I think it is for the people in Ukraine. But generally, the dedication to keeping it going, I think, has sort of dark forces behind it. But man, that made me it was so uncomfortable, so embarrassing. I felt terrible for Zelensky, and it almost made me like a cheerleader for the war effort. But then in the days that passed, I was really shocked, at least, I don't know, within the bubble that I exist in. The the fact that that touched a lot of people, I mean, negatively, that they were like, yes, they were living vicariously through Trump. Trump was saying what they would like to have said to Zelensky. Um, uh, it really made me realize that how much anti-war sentiment is out there, and how much the right is the only force that's been giving voice to it. Because yeah, the level of cringe was unbearable for me, but the fact that people didn't see it that way, I found very, very interesting. That they really thought, now finally someone is taking this guy to task. You know, people talking about like, how many more sons do you want to put through a meat grinder for this, endless war. And in the UK, they're just, can't wait to go and send all the useless, quote unquote, useless working class people to die as quote unquote peacekeepers. Yes, there's a huge amount of this has come to embody a huge amount of anti-elite sentiment, and I think Trump was giving voice to it, which was not the feeling that I had while I was watching it.
Yeah, so one thing that was notable here was the fact that Zelensky is, like Trump, a showman in his origins. Both have television careers. As everyone knows, Zelensky played the president on a popular TV show before becoming the president. So, it's that there's just something so bizarre and emblematic about his whole trajectory. I think my crudest comment on it was it clearly was detrimental to him that he did not use an interpreter and attempted to do the whole conversation in English. I think, not just because certain things seem to have been lost in translation, but because I think that would have inserted a bit of decorum and formality into the discussion. Whereas, in fact, what you had was three leaders who are all in different ways showmen who, have this kind of performance aspect to their personas. I mean, as do all politicians, but to a special degree, and who are none of whom are averse to kind of grandstanding and mixing it up and all these kinds of things. And so it seemed it was an interesting illustration of how it just like it was kind of like reality TV, but the logic of reality TV had kind of invaded the realm of diplomacy. And it literally was reality TV. It was this thing unfolding in real time on camera. And so there was something quite strange about that. I think overall my analysis of it is that there was, on one hand, a kind of stripping of the pretenses of decorum and of kind of the usual kind of pomposity and so on of these sorts of meetings, and that showed that we are in a different kind of more raw and more unmediated political moment, and yet what sort of mediates it is this, and hence the showmanship being important, is this kind of attempt to directly appeal, even in the context of something like diplomacy, to kind of directly appeal to the animal spirits of your base, kind of in the process of undertaking these negotiations. And I think that it points to a different kind of mediation, which is kind of a symptom of the weakening of sort of institutional structures, where instead of kind of appealing to institutions and the kind of formal and procedural structures that they provide, you're just trying to kind of channel what you want directly to some kind of base that can be reached. Let's be honest, less even through television, but through kind of viral clips that are extracted from it and circulated. And so it's important that in this regard, what most people saw was sort of the final part of the discussion, which was the most contentious. And there were a lot of debates about, did who was really at fault here, and depending on who you listen to, it was Trump or Vance, or it was Zelensky, and each could kind of extract particular sections of the video to present their case for who was at fault. So I don't know. I mean, it was a strange kind of illustration of a sort of postmodern logic of diplomacy. And I think it seemed to entail this kind of stripping of pretenses and this kind of presentation of the raw kind of naked exercise of power, which again I think is consistent with what I was pointing out before. But I suppose the twist I would add here is just to say that this is itself a kind of mediated performance and mediatic performance. It just corresponds to a different logic than what we're used to.
It's the performance of authenticity, right? That's what makes it sell so well.
Right, which is why I think that this is the kind of logic of reality TV just inserting itself into more and more realms. So
yeah, I had I really didn't have a kind of even-handed reaction to it. I thought that Vance and Trump were in the right as a matter of decorum and on policy, and Zelensky, while acting from a very understandable position, was wrong. Zelensky was advised by Trump's advisors to wear a suit to the meeting. He did not. He wore his kind of wartime outfit. He knew that the administration didn't want to grant security guarantees. He kept raising that possibility. I understand why he does all these things. He wants to dramatize the tremendous suffering of his people with his dress. He wants to get the best possible deal for his country. It's understandable that he does these things, but he is in the office of the president of the nation that is responsible for backing his country, that has backed his country, and I think that put the onus on him to be a good guest. He turned the conversation into an interrogation of one of the participants, Vance. That was quite a change. It was really the principals answering questions from the media, but then Zelensky asked Vance a question. Yes, Vance had made a comment that Zelensky was bound to dislike, but Zelensky had also been saying things that Trump was bound to dislike. Never mind Vance. So I thought that was striking. The fact that Zelensky was asked about his dress is pretty absurd. But hey, why not? Let's talk about it. I don't like his shtick with the outfit. The refusal to wear normal dress, especially in a diplomatic context like this, is an expression of the fact that Zelensky claims a certain legitimacy, a certain moral authority stemming from the fact that his nation is engaged in war. And that's a distinct form of legitimacy or authority than one derives from electoral victory in a democratic process. It's not necessarily at odds with it, but it's distinct. And it's not coincidental for that reason that tin pot dictators tend to wear military dress, because they need to claim a kind of authority or legitimacy, and doing so through defense of the people, through this kind of martial identity is natural for them when they're not facing real or credible elections. Obviously, it's very understandable why Ukraine hasn't held elections when it's under assault. I'm not going to pretend to be, an expert in the way Ukraine's political system works, or to have strong opinions on how frequently they should hold elections. I won't do that, but I do think that there's this idea that's very, very common, that regardless of what preference the American people have expressed through their own elections, we have to keep fighting this war in a certain way, because there's that old American idea that politics stops at the water's edge, which is another way of saying that democratic outcomes aren't supposed to affect our foreign policy. Uh, there are different constituencies, different things that matter more than what the people say. And you saw another expression of that in Zelensky's asking Vance, "Have you been to Ukraine?" Surely, all things being equal, it would be useful to see the situation in Ukraine. Vance dismissed the idea of visiting as a propaganda tour. These things are always going to be propaganda tours in some form or other. Ukraine's no different in that way. Uh, but fundamentally, uh, you know, one shouldn't have to be an expert, or have to be or have to have visited the country to have an opinion on it. If you have to have visited Ukraine to have a legitimate opinion on it, well, the American people have no right to have any view on it whatsoever, unless they're from you know, Pittsburgh's little Ukraine neighborhood, or something, or here where I live in New York, I live in the East Village to South Docks, so plenty of people here would have legitimate opinion on it down at Veselka or whatever, but maybe not many others in the country.
So one further thought, I think part of what you're seeing is a shift in the dynamic that has existed between Zelensky and Western leaders since the beginning of this war. And, Matthew, brought up the point that, that there is just a fundamental issue at stake here, which is that Zelensky is a beneficiary of U.S. largesse, military aid, logistical and tactical support, etc., and therefore should be in a kind of deferential position in relation to his country's main patron, right? And so that seems sort of obvious and straightforward. And so then the question is why would that have not been already assumed? And I think the answer is that actually a lot of the time the deference has gone in the other direction, because Zelensky and his struggle has kind of offered something to the Western leaders who have committed to it, which is that it's, literally just being able to have photo ops with this guy who, in fatigues or, whatever, who, has this kind of swagger and, is engaged in this righteous struggle, was a way for these otherwise kind of bloodless technocrats and pretty feckless leaders without, a particularly impressive popular mandate to, cloak themselves in these sort of Western values and this idea of a struggle for freedom from subjugation by a sort of despotic foreign power. And so he really did have the situation where he could count on the deference of these Western leaders towards him, even though, in terms of pure dollars and cents, clearly the relationship was one in which they were the patrons and he was the beneficiary of their largesse. Nonetheless, symbolically, the deference went in the opposite direction. And so this was, perhaps the first time, and I think, this is why the clothes thing is significant as well, because, the point is like, I found one thing was slightly silly about the "why aren't you wearing a suit" thing is like, okay, meanwhile, a few rooms over, you have Elon Musk swanning around in athleisure and a baseball cap. Like, this isn't exactly a White House that's defined by its sort of insistence on traditional, formal dress in work settings. But nonetheless, I think it was significant because the Zelensky uniform is, part of how he's attained this deference, right? Because these sort of, feckless and aimless leaders struggling to hold on to power could attach themselves to this guy who is on the front lines of struggling for, Western values and democracy and and national self-determination and all these things. And so his being able to kind of position himself that way was extremely important in the symbolic dynamic that he was able to achieve. And now that's kind of been overturned.
Can I add, Jeff? It was nice to see Elon in a suit at the presidential address to Congress. I mean, what makes him so special that he can walk into the Oval Office in this T-shirt and ball cap with some kind of printed kind of Reddit level slogan on it, and instead he just had to sit up there in a gallery dressed in a suit like any normal guy, instead of being dressed more casually than the doorman everywhere he goes. And I find that frankly refreshing. Also, it was just to rant on Elon for a moment longer. Seeing him up there in the gallery, he was honored. Oh, Elon, you're so great. Doge this. You eliminated the funding for the sedentary migrants. I still have no real sense of how factual these claims of Trump's
you could
were.
hear the people shouting, "That's false."
Yeah,
So,
they kind of, we're all Joe Wilson now. I am Joe Wilson. I am Joe Wilson. And anyway, but he was up there in the gallery alongside people who I find a lot more sympathetic. The mother of Laken Riley, the nursing student killed by an illegal migrant, the mother of the mother of Jocelyn Nungary, another a girl killed by an illegal migrant. And I thought just seeing all these people up there who are just very kind of normal Americans, dressed up as nicely as could be, it just felt clearly Trump's ability to serve these people, Trump's ability to speak for them, is the basis of whatever importance and legitimacy he has as a figure. And it really isn't about his ability to channel the dynamism or the cost-cutting savvy of an Elon Musk. And I just thought that the presence of these other kind of humbler people was so much more powerful and electric than the really overblown presence of our kind of billionaire overlord.
Just one more point on the dress thing, but it's kind of just a jumping off point. Yeah, it's interesting because he would have known that, like Zelensky and his team would have known that not only would the kind of combat the air of like being on the front lines not work as it had for European leaders, that simply sort of getting a photo op next to Zelensky wouldn't give legitimacy to Trump in the same way that it did for everybody else. He would have known that. So why did he do it? And as you guys were talking, I just put on my tinfoil hat for a second, but I started to think, like,
which you always have ready to hand.
Yes, it's always there. And I just started to think, that he must have known that he was going to piss them off. And I started to wonder, like, perhaps it was I don't know now, but perhaps it was a kind of public breakup with this major donor in favor of an enormous step up in spending from the European Union, because one of the big goals of the EU and of Ursula von der Leyen for ages was the idea of a European military. And now they have their justification. There's talk of moving ahead with this. It's extraordinarily unpopular. And I'm just sort of tinfoil hat. I wonder if this pulling out of America gives that kind of justification.
Yeah, to step into Zelensky's shoes for a moment. I mean, nothing could be more intolerable from his perspective than to sign or bless an agreement that involves forfeiting a huge part of your country for which your countrymen have died. It's obviously offends his moral sense, his patriotic feelings, and also it's just a profoundly bad idea in terms of his own legitimacy and future career, because the sources of his legitimacy are his ability to represent the national interests of Ukraine and his ability to reflect the sentiments and self-image of a kind of Atlanticist global class. And in terms of both those bases of support that he seeks to represent, smiling with Trump as he signs away part of his country effectively is just a horrible idea for him. So maybe he needed his moment of defiance, and the deal will kind of get made without the photo op, and that'll just work better for all concerned, better for bringing peace now, better for those who want to launch and perpetuate stabbed in the back narrative, which is sure to take hold in Ukraine and elsewhere in the wake of any ceasefire.
And better for those who want to step up the military to stop anything from happening in the future. So yeah, everybody gets what they want.
No, I get why Zelensky didn't want to be there. I think it's very understandable from his perspective.
How do you segue from that to Meghan Markle?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. We on this podcast really do like to save the most important topics for last. We reserve them for the most committed listeners, the ones who have stamina, and that's why we're here to discuss Meghan Markle's new Netflix series, which is titled "With Love, Meghan," or what is it called, Ashley?
Is it With Love, Meghan?
With Love, Meghan. Ashley suggested that we discuss this. I hadn't heard of it, but I did turn it on this morning before we recorded and watched some of it. My wife shortly emailed me. She got a notification saying a new device is signed into your Netflix account, and she said, "Have we been hacked?" And I said, "No, I'm just watching Meghan Markle's show at 9 in the morning."
Okay, so
it was pretty amazing, inspiring, revelatory. I feel
Did it bring you
rejuvenated as a homemaker and cook. How does it make you feel, Ashley?
Right. So I nauseated, but I suggested this because it was all over X and social media, these clips of her, and I have this like pathological feeling for the underdog. It's similar with Zelensky, right? Like I felt for him, and it's always against my better judgment. I felt for her, how she was just getting dragged. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, right. I see. I understand. I understand. There was a New York Post article that described it as like, compared it to Delicious Dish. Do you remember from Saturday Night Live? Like, my sweaty balls. It would be so much better. Actually, the difference between Delicious Dish and Meghan Markle is that Delicious Dish was at least entertaining and dropped some accidental sexual innuendo every now and then. I mean, that was what was missing. But oh my God, it was like, like reading. It's like she was reading signs out of I don't know, those home stores like Eat, Pray, Love, Treat Yourself. It brings me joy. Food is my love language. Woman, do you hear yourself? And it's just like the both of them, they're like, love me. Why won't you love me? And I remember I tweeted once like, Harry, I know you're reading this. Stop Googling yourself. They just got it. Like, they're so obsessed. They're like, people just, if they could just see us, they would love us. And what they don't understand is the more that we see of you, the more we hate you, because they're just so out of touch. Like, oh, I'm just like everyone else. I go on a hike in the woods with my socialite friend from Argentina. No, woman. No, we don't put popcorn on the bedside table of our guests and a wonderful lavender scent that, mixed with Himalayan rock salt. Like, what?
She made this, like 2-gallon jar full of bath salts. And I don't really know how to use that stuff, but that seems like a just astounding quantity of it. But I want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of the show. Jeff, I'm not sure, has done his homework. I hope he's speed watching it right now. Netflix, you can do the kind of 1.5 speed, Jeff. So
I watched it at 1.5 speed and
Yeah.
it still dragged. It's
I
still
know,
dragged.
I was doing that, dude. So Jeff, start now, and you can chime in toward the end of this discussion. We'll go for probably about an hour more on this, by the way. But okay, in terms of the actual mechanics of the production, what I gathered the 20 or so minutes I was able to watch of the first episode is that we are introduced to this beautiful home where Markle is preparing things for a, her guest, who's her beloved hairdresser or sorry, makeup artist. And and this is wonderful. Really, the home is beautiful. Uh, Meghan is well spoken, even if she has nothing to say, and she's doing all these thoughtful things. But there are a couple strange elements to this. Though one, it's not actually her home,
Yeah.
and two, the man is not actually staying there. He's staying at her real home, which is not what we're seeing. And so it doesn't really work as a kind of window into the lifestyles of the rich and famous. I think Markle has a child or children.
Yeah.
And so someone who has young children, I would be more interested in seeing, well, how convincingly have they made it seem that the Markle home is orderly and well run, or is it fairly chaotic, as homes with young children tend to be? And what's it like? Are they able to host visitors, even as they try to herd their children? Something that I would certainly struggle to do. Um, but instead, it's this kind of display of hospitality on a movie on a movie's set. You know, very very odd from that perspective. Uh, but Ashley and maybe Jeff can come in here too. But just what is it about the Meghan Harry thing that has made them so uh, polarizing? And yeah, I would say widely hated. What I know most about Markle myself is just the pre-Harry Markle, because I watched that show Suits when it came out, a fair bit
As
of
did
it,
I. Yeah.
and I thought the show was enjoyable. I thought she was good on it. Not a hugely. It's not one of these ambitious. Oh well, this is the new White Lotus. This is the successor to the Sopranos, or this is the Wire. It was very light. I thought it was pretty good. Um, but why did this seemingly very appealing actress become such a polarizing figure?
Well, I'm so desperate to spill so many beans because I actually have a friend who has a friend who is connected to the royal family and often slips me wonderful little tidbits that nobody knows about that I'm not allowed to share. So I'm actually like, oh, do you know what actually happened? But I can't because I'll get sued. And there's a reason why the UK press didn't say anything, because they threatened to sue absolutely everyone. But I will say this. The thing that makes us absolutely hate them is the difference between curated faux authenticity and off the cuff authenticity. And this is what people cannot get through their heads. So she's trying to like curate to like the within an inch of its life, this joyful life, right? This wonderful life. People hate that. And you're absolutely right. We would have loved to see even a fake performance of authenticity of her getting puked on by a toddler. That would be endearing. And that's what people really like. That's what what Donald Trump has tapped into. A kind of performed authenticity that seems real, that seems genuine, that actually gives people a peek. And the Democrats can't get this through their heads. The Labor in the UK can't get this through their heads. Even the Tories, even though they've got like Kemi Badenoch, she's performing. Oh, you plebs. Oh, you stupid people, you working class people. You want somebody who's offensive. Okay, here we go. There we got someone who's offensive. Let's go and workshop this. Let's have a focus group on how to exactly to curate these perfect little offensive points. And why doesn't it work? Because everybody knows she can't stray from a talking point. Everybody knows Meghan Markle can't say anything except it brings me joy. It's everything is curated, and it's a performance, even a performance of in Kemi Badenoch's case, a performance of offensiveness. And what Trump has hit on is that perfect sense of, I just said this off the top of my head. And that is what makes people like you. That's what people want. That's what they're desperate for. They're sick of everything being carefully curated and workshopped to within an inch of its life.
Geoff, I really want to bring you in on this.
I'm very sorry I haven't done my homework on this show. It's I'm always interested in the Harry and Meghan saga, and the only points I'll make here is it's worth recalling the huge sort of media deals that they got, kind of coming out of the fallout, falling out with the royal family, and they were given this like ridiculous podcast deal, and then I think like barely produced any podcasts. So, I think another point here would just be, there's a certain kind of person who wants to or manages to parlay a certain status into, these kind of media deals and things, but they're actually just very low effort, and it seems like they're just, like Meghan is just, a bit low effort here. So it's weird because on one hand it's this very it's kind of very strained, but on the other hand it seems that it's taken, I mean, wasn't there like a Netflix deal years ago that it seemed had just like never come to anything, and I guess maybe this is the final result of it. I'm not sure, but I know that
they did another show or something.
Yeah, they did do another show. Anyway, but all I know is that like various media,
it was about our story and how we fell in love.
Right. So, but a bunch of, various media outlets gave them these big deals, and then they just failed to produce. And so I don't know. I mean, there's something interesting about that. I suppose it's a kind of version of aristocratic life today that, we complain about the royal family being given these kind of sinecures, just to kind of be who they are. But then I guess, what they did when they came to America was achieve something similar, where they're, just being given millions and millions of dollars to do very little except just kind of exist and, and kind of, publicize their lives to some extent. So it's like, even if you've abolished the monarchy, this, and the celebrity culture that we have today is like, it can accommodate people who are actually quite lazy and like don't really put that much effort into even being a celebrity. So I'm kind of impressed by how they've parlayed that system to their favor. But I have not done my homework and seen this show, so I can't comment on it.
It's okay, you got all the best bits. There's a giant thing of salt, and at one point her makeup artist friend says, I feel like this is all fake. And that's pretty much it. That's all you need to see.
The salt thing is really odd, just in the way it's filmed. She mixes together some different kinds of salt, and she puts some sort of oil in it or whatever and stirs it up, and then she pours it into this gigantic jar, but it only fills up about a third of the jar. So then she says something like, I need to fill this up. And so she then just pours more salt in on the top of the mixture.
We just got to pad this out, which is like a pretty good metaphor for the show.
And yeah, but she hasn't really properly mixed it. If she's just putting in, like if you were trying to make some recipe and you said, oh, well, I need a little more here, so I'm just going to add twice as much flour without increasing the other ingredients correspondingly, it would make no sense and suggest that fundamentally you don't care what goes into this jar and no one's going to use it. It was just very, very funny. The Meghan Harry thing, I feel like we've discussed it on the podcast. I trust we have, because we are committed to bringing these important topics to the attention of our listeners. There is something tragic about it. I think we've discussed. Just Prince Harry was such a beautiful figure, playing naked pool in Las Vegas, fighting, um, for his country. Just seemingly, he was, Prince Hal, and even if he would never assume the mantle of authority and renounce Falstaff and his youthful ways, he nonetheless really seemed the most princely kind of all the British princes. And then somehow he just became a kind of therapeutic, um it's just another
He
kind of whiny sort of soy-lenial.
Yeah.
So sort of he kind of
he
wrote this.
contracted the woke mind virus.
Yes.
It's
Well,
true.
he wrote this book, kind of talking about how it was very odd. He seemed to be boasting about how many people he had killed in war, but also kind of turning it into this whiny thing about how traumatized he was, and really unclear of whether or not he should play this for pity or for the admiration of the lads. And he just seemed to lose uh, any idea of who he was, and he actually seemed to have a firmer idea of that when he was just doing bizarre things. Did he dress up as a Nazi once or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, not a good idea, but at least it was somehow conforming to this bad boy prince image. Someone who's doing really ill-advised and very objectionable things, but it still fits with a certain idea of the of the Prince of Hal. And then he lost that. Something to lament from the British perspective. I've always been tempted to celebrate it as an American nationalist. Look how our culture of celebrity and capitalism has devoured everything, up to and including the British royal house.
Mhm.
We conquer all. But it's a little sad to see the old forms pass away.
Well, you can have a harvest basket if it makes you feel any better.
Yeah, the heart, the Trader Joe's kind of peanut butter pretzels. I don't. We have to tell you this, Chuck, because you have no idea. But she took them out of a Trader Joe's bag and then put them into another bag, and then just that had no branding or marketing on it, and then placed that bag in a little basket to put by her guest's bedside table. Um, uh, Not at the house she was in, though. So
Yeah.
very, very odd.
So
Markle is
relatable, though.
yeah,
Every now and then you just got to borrow your millionaire friend's mansion. It's,
yeah. I
we've all
mean,
got friends.
she's sitting on something magical. It's a new form. It's so fake. It's getting real.
And I think that's
well,
all we've got for you.
I think we're getting to the next chapter in Zelensky's career. Once his presidency ends, is so obvious that I don't even need to say it. But there are many TV deals waiting for him,
Right.
podcast deals.
Yeah, I mean,
his opportunities are infinite, basically. So,
well, a Trump return to TV in the post presidency would be incredible.
they could do a show together, actually.
Yeah, that would be perfect. So with that, thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks to our producer, Stephen Adebato. Until next time, compactmag.com/subscribe.